welcome back to She's Constructing It. Guess what? You're almost at the point of your building where your building is considered dried in or secure for weather. So let's take a look at siding and roofing. There's some terminology we probably need to go into here. Most people know the roof goes on top, but what are the other pieces? So this orange piece on the front, or reddish piece on the front, is considered fascia. That's protecting the tail end of my eaves. The other pieces on the underside, that silver metal right there, that's called the soffit. And these are terms you need to know even if you're buying pre-made soffit and fascia. Remember, in our roof, our soffit is an air breathing channel. So we've got that core vent right at the edge of our soffit. Sometimes you'll buy soffit with air breathing channels in it. That's pretty common if you have a breathing roof rather than putting core vent in. Other pieces on the building that we're going to look at is also our window trim. We're looking at this upper window here. We've done our window trim in wood, but remember to think about the bottom up process. We need water to be able to drain out, so our sides continue down past our bottom piece, and then we have a top piece and a cap. On the bottom of our building, we have no wood corners because we live in a high fire danger area. So we're trying to keep our wood off the ground and up our building a little bit. We also want to consider what utility entrances we're going to have in our building, because that might change what siding we use. And also, what details are we going to need to hide? So the edge of this metal is really messy. So this wood trim piece underneath makes my building look nice and clean. We went for a transition piece here of that same red metal to try and make our different materials look intentional. And that bottom piece at the very, very bottom, remember we talked about that, that's our mouse and critter, anti-mouse and critter piece of black metal that's closing off our building because our building's sitting on blocks. And then in the bottom piece of metal here, if you're buying this would be called a wainscot. That's another one of those terms that might be handy to know. Some elements on the upper edge of our roof you might want to consider that we don't have here is what's happening when stuff runs off your roof. There's pieces called drip edge. They're little pieces of metal that make water run off your roof and not wrap around the corner. And then also, we don't have it here, but you might want to be considering gutters, because where is all that water and snow load going? Do you want to walk through that? Is that creating problems in your building? One of the biggest reasons we put siding on our building is to prevent it from water damage and insects, so that we don't have to go back and do these repairs later. So with the studio, one of the ways we protected the bottom of our building before we put siding on is that zip tape that's connecting our sheathing to our underside of our floor and our skids. That's both a water and an air barrier. On the big house, there's a lot more layers to this. The black piece you see on the bottom of this wall, that is a piece of rubber that is creating an air barrier when we stand up the wall. And then the big house also has the foam insulation protecting the foundation. And that foam is super vulnerable to insects, particularly ants. They like tunneling in it. So that's part of the reason we added that copper. You can see the gold color above, a little copper shielding, because insects in general do not enjoy copper. So that's to try and keep the creepy crawlies from tunneling in our foam and also from trying to slip up under our building. And then above that, we have a piece of flashing that is connecting to the bottom plates of our building. They're weird curved plates, so it meant for weird curved flashing. Straighter plates is easier to flash. And then above all of that, our favorite type of flashing tape, we got to use the zip tape to connect the bottom plate flashing to our actual wall sheathing there. And this means when water comes in and it comes down our building, even if it gets behind our siding, it's going to go down the building. Even if it gets behind what we will have Tyvek on this, it'll go down, go over all those layers because we did it from the bottom up. Our big house has exterior insulation for a significant increase in R value. We didn't do it on the studio because it's so expensive and we have to buy it in big lots. This is rock wool. It's very fire resistant. If we did it over again, I'd use metal batting here so that if we had a fire, it wouldn't catch fire to the wood bats here, but it still will improve the chances of our building in a fire. But it does change some things as far as our siding. So we needed to create a rain screen, and a rain screen is a vented space that allows air to come up from the bottom and vent out the top. This means if moisture gets behind our siding, it isn't going to soak our insulation or ruin our walls. Rain screens are a great idea if you live in a wet area. In our case, rain screens were a great idea because we had this exterior insulation. The core vent is that same stuff we used on the studio that doesn't allow insects in it because it's screened and has really small channels. And then the bats here are what we're going to attach our siding to. So these have great big 4-inch screws that go all the way through the 2 inches of Rockwool insulation and connect to the sheathing on our building. And in places where it's really important, they connect to the studs in our building. You'll notice we have bats along the sides of our windows. This is really going to help for attaching trim to our windows as well. We wanted to use a durable siding here, so we have a metal wainscot on the bottom, and then we used fiber cement board above that. The metal wainscot can take a fair bit of moisture, and the fiber cement should last a really long time and be fairly fire resistant. As opposed to this building, which has T111, which can be a great siding. It can also be your siding and your shear panel all in one, but it tends to be more maintenance intensive. On this garage project, we just used fiber cement board all the way to the bottom, but we made sure that it didn't get too much water splash. There are lots of great siding materials out there, so do your research and choose it based on your aesthetics and your durability for the long term. On the studio, we used refugee metal for the whole project, and the trim was all refugee wood from those sheep sheds. Big shout out to screws here. You never know when you're going to need to take things apart. I would never nail siding again because I have taken apart things unexpectedly that I thought would be sided forever, and the more siding you ruin, the more it will pay for your screws. We're going to talk about 2 common types of roofing that you can do yourself in the West. One is asphalt shingles and the other is the metal roof. We used a metal roof on the studio because it's both durable and fire resistant. So we went ahead and we did this ribbed metal and we did a top fastener metal roof. That means occasionally we'll have to go up and check and make sure our metal roofing screws with their rubber washers aren't leaking. Some other comparisons between asphalt and metal roofs. Metal roofs are generally more expensive, but asphalt roofs need to be replaced more often. And in our area, they aren't recyclable, so you're taking all of that material to the dump. In our case here, we got seconds on this metal roof. It's a leftover metal roof, so we got a pretty good deal on it, and it wasn't too bad to install. On the big house, we splurged for hidden fastener roof. It has these clips that are attached to our decking, and then each piece of metal, in this case, these metal pieces were made on site at our location, and some of them are 40 feet long, was put up, and then it clips in, and all the fasteners are hidden, so you don't have to go up and check them in the same way. Again, all the roofing details still applied. When you look at the underneath of your roof, you're going to need to look at the details of how your roof gets protected, just like window flashing, just like all of that. It's a bottom-up process. Since we live in a cold place and might get ice dams, we have a peel and stick roofing material on the bottom that's covering our zip sheathing that was taped at the seams and on the edges where it might ice dam. And then our roofing felt, in this case roofing felt meant for metal roofing, goes over that. It's the same for asphalt roofing. You can just use something cheaper like a tar paper, which you can't use when you're doing metal. And then in asphalt shingles, there's rules for how your overlaps are and where your courses start that'll be specific and mentioned on your roofing. If you're doing asphalt shingles or metal roofs, remember when you're doing remodels or extensions, you can add things in, just go from the bottom up so it drains over the top. We know that was a lot to try and absorb, but your details for your siding and your roofing are going to be very specific depending on what type of siding and roofing you personally decide to do. This is where you're going to want to contact your building department, look at your building codes, talk with your local lumber company and experts, and watch other YouTube videos and online details to see what you really like, what matches your aesthetics, what helps out your building, and what you want for sustainability and durability.